Street, Book 4. Written by Angela Castillo. Narrated by J. Grace Pennington. Chapter 1. Meeting Aidan. A playful draft tugged at Juniper's long brown hair and sent the ties on the side of the craft shelter spinning into a crazy dance. "Okay, April," she muttered. "That's a delightful breeze you have going on there, but don't get carried away and take our tent off with you." She nestled a flower-shaped clay magnet in with its companions on a metal ladder display and stepped back, surveying her work. "What do you think?" she asked her best friend and roommate, Penny Martin, who was finishing a chalkboard list of prices. Penny rose from the sidewalk, her short blonde curls bobbing along her shoulders. "It's our prettiest booth yet. Your pottery and my paintings make a cohesive display. I bet we'll beat our best sales day ever." "I don't know about that." Juniper squinted and folded her arms. "We made $700 at the sale last month. Seems slow today. I'll be happy if we do half that with the size of this crowd." "I hope we make more." Penny frowned. "Tips at the pub haven't been so brilliant. Then I skipped work for jury duty last month, remember that? A little extra rent money would help." "For sure." The aroma of funnel cake wafted to Juniper's senses, and she inhaled deeply. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her that in her excitement she'd forgotten breakfast. "If you think we're all set, do you mind if I get something from the cafe? I'm starving." "Sure, go ahead." Penny waved her away. "Could you grab me a coffee?" "Of course." Juniper snagged a 20 from the change box and tucked it in her pocket. The weather was as perfect as a spring day in Texas could be, with no hint of the searing summer to come. "I bet it'll be hotter this afternoon." Pulling a band from her purse, she twisted her straight brown hair up into its normal messy bun. Clicks from knitting needles came from the first stand she passed. Two ladies with matching puffs of white hair crocheted animals to add to the colorful menagerie hanging from the sides of their shelter. Another table offered bracelets and rings created from spoons, while another displayed antique dishes. Caffeine's siren call trumped the desire to stop and peruse all the beautiful things. Juniper hurried down the street to the coffee shop bakery beside the antique store. The delightful scent of cinnamon and baked bread hit her nose as she entered the cafe. A line of people stretched throughout the small store. From their sun visors and comfortable clothes, Juniper guessed most were also craft fair folks. Colorful canvases lined the bake shop's shelves and walls. Each piece of art sported a label and a price tag. These are all for sale. Genius use for wall space. Watercolor horses galloped across a 3-foot canvas hanging from the wall by the counter. What a gorgeous piece. I'll have to tell Penny to come take a look when she has the chance. "They display work by local artists here," a voice said behind her. She swiveled and almost bumped into a tall, wide-shouldered man. "Sorry," the man stepped back and grinned. "Kayla always has a decent-sized crowd this time of morning." He was 20-something, with shaggy dark hair and a faded Counting Crows t-shirt. The shadow of a beard covered his firm jaw. Juniper returned the smile. "That's all right. Wow, how cool of the business to support artists. Wish shops would do this in Austin, where I'm from. I mean, I've never seen any that do. I'm an artist, so I would notice." "Oh, no kidding?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Me too. I do woodwork and mosaics." "Pottery," she said. He studied her with expressive olive eyes. "I'd love to look at some of your stuff. I'm guessing you have a booth outside?" "Yes," she replied. "I do mostly pinch plates, pots, and miniatures, but I have some thrown pieces." "Cool. I've tried my hand at pottery a bit myself in college, but I stuck with wood in the end." He nodded his head towards the counter. "I think you're next." "Oh, why, so I am." Juniper pushed her thick bangs just a touch too long out of her eyes and smiled at the woman behind the counter. "Hi, I need a mocha latte and a double shot espresso. And," she checked the case, "2 blueberry scones, please." As she waited on the side for her drinks, she couldn't help watching the man she'd run into. He lounged against the counter as he ordered his coffee, trading jokes with the barista. Either he lives here or he does this craft fair every quarter. The barista took his time making the coffee. Normally, Juniper would have been stressed about getting back to her booth, but she found herself hoping for more time to talk to the mysterious artist. Her breath quickened as he moved over to join her. He stuck out a leathered hand. "Aiden Lakes. Can't wait to check out your booth." She shook his hand. "Juniper Rains. I'm down around the corner by the bookshop." "Aha, nice to meet you, Juniper." She took her coffees and scones and headed out the door and down the street. Wow, Aiden is super cute. And an artist. I didn't see a ring. Wonder if he's single. Sweat beaded on her forehead. She didn't want to think about another relationship right now. 4 months. Way too soon. Nick Jansen was the one. She'd been sure of it, with his golden blonde rancher look. He'd taken her to hunting shows and to his country gigs where he played guitar. She'd even dressed the part in cowboy boots and lace crop tops, so different from her normal casual slip dresses and boho blouses. He'd never shown more than a polite interest in her art, but they'd shared a similar upbringing. Their families attended the same church and even vacationed together a summer or two. The perfect fit, or so it had seemed. No muss, no fuss, just happily ever after. Everything had been well and good until she'd caught Nick kissing a waitress in a back alley after one of his shows. Nick tried to explain it away, but Juniper knew the truth. His eye wandered, and marriage wouldn't fix the problem. She feared he could never be fully true to her. After the breakup, Nick's parents wouldn't speak to her parents, and her mom and dad pleaded with her to give Nick another chance. The exact people who should have been on her side through everything desired her self-betrayal. The pressure became so bad she'd moved out of her parents' house and into an apartment with Penny. She'd had to cut back on her online college classes and trade her part-time job working at her suburban town art gallery for a full-time waitressing at the pub where Penny worked. The stress from all the change was immense, but people were forced to make hard choices all the time. The freedom and relief she'd experienced had been worth it all in the long run. Better than ending up divorced and me left with a baby. Penny had been there for her in so many ways. What would I do without her? Thank goodness for these little outlets of time to set up booths in small towns and pretend they were real artists. And who knows, maybe someday I'll be able to sell my art full-time. Chapter 2. Minding the Nanny. Juniper arrived back at the booth to see Penny in the middle of a conversation with a customer. They stood together in the street, examining one of Penny's larger watercolors of a crow perched on a fence line. "I love the way you've captured his expression," said the customer, a woman in her mid-40s with shoulder-length curly hair. "You can tell he's planning mischief, like most of the crows I see." Penny's lips curled into her pixie smile. "Oh, yes, that's why I love painting them. We have a crow that comes to my apartment's balcony every morning to beg for bites of my breakfast. He's a saucy little thing." The woman squinted at the canvas. "I do believe it's just the thing to hang in the break room at work. He can keep an eye on the refrigerator and make sure no one steals my yogurt." "Did you want the print in this size or the smaller 8x10? Asked Penny. "Oh, the biggest one you have. This crow should be appreciated in his full beauty." The woman scanned the rest of the booth. "Do you have a framed version?" "Oh, I wish I did." Penny arched her eyebrow in Juniper's direction. Juniper smiled. Custom framed jobs cost a fortune, and Penny could never afford to get all her work framed. Not to mention how heavy they would be to lug out of the car. "No matter. I'll take it to the hobby shop Monday." The woman waved her hand. She paid and walked away, clutching her treasure in an oversized shopping bag. "Here's your coffee, and I brought you a scone." Juniper pointed to the bags on the table. "Must have read my mind." Penny pulled a baked good from the bag and crammed a big bite into her mouth. Heavenly," she said with her mouth full. "And our first sale already." Juniper clapped her hands. "I think we'll have a good day." "Yes, that's $65 in the till," said Penny. "Not a shabby start at all." People bustled in and out of the booth through the morning. Juniper sold several pinch pots and 2 vases in her popular cream and lavender color with the flower etchings. Though these were by far her most popular colors and patterns, new ideas continually popped into her mind. She kept a book crammed with sketches in her purse at all times. Her gaze wandered to the giant pine trees lining the opposite side of the street. I'd love to do a series based on the pines, maybe golden green with an etched pine cone. She shook her head. Glazes and paints cost money. I better make some sales today before I start coming up with new ideas. Her favorite creation, a gallon pitcher, stood on the top shelf of the center table. The black and plum purple color combination swirled and dripped, and she'd etched an intricate orchid design into the side. The most perfect and beautiful thing she'd ever made. The $400 price tag sat proudly at the base, written in curlicues 6 months ago. Back then, she'd naively figured she'd sell it at the first show. Since then, she'd placed it in the same spot at the beginning of every fair, and carefully wrapped it up again at the end of the day, vowing to keep it on her shelf at home, where at least she would appreciate it. Miss Farbenshire, her teacher and mentor from the kiln she used, had praised the pitcher. "400 is more than fair," she'd said, "but it's not always easy to find customers who will spend so much at your typical small-town fair. Hold on. Eventually you will find a soul who will give it true worth." Since Juniper had started selling at craft fairs, she'd had offers for $75 or $100, but she just couldn't let the pitcher go for such a low price. A loud clomping noise followed by shouting disturbed her reverie. A flash of brown fur flew by the stand. Penny rose from her fold-out chair, her eyes widening. "Was that a goat?" "I think so, but it was the biggest goat I've ever seen," said Juniper. "Won't it hurt someone?" said Penny. "Be more likely to get hurt," said Juniper, "especially with all the big dogs I've seen wandering around today. Maybe I should try to catch it." "Are you crazy?" Penny frowned. "Be right back." Juniper darted down the street after the animal. The goat, who wore a hat and a little bell around its neck, wended its way through the crowd, continuing at a steady trot. People jumped out of the way, yanking strollers back and pulling on unsuspecting toddlers' hands. An elderly couple turned to see the goat approaching them. The man's eyes widened and the woman screamed. "Head her off!" came a familiar voice in the crowd. Juniper put on a burst of speed, waving her arms and yelling. The goat leapt over a little girl in a wagon, narrowly missing the child's dripping snow cone. Juniper yelled, "Hey, goat, get over!" She wasn't sure if that was the sort of thing one should say to a giant goat, but it was all she could think of, and it seemed right at least. "Get her to run this way," the same voice called. Somehow she steered the goat in the direction of the voice. Aiden stood beside a rusted gate next to the old dime-store pharmacy. The goat bounded into the opening, its tail flashing white behind it. Aiden slammed the gate shut. "That'll keep you till your mama catches up." You know who it belongs to?" asked Juniper as she gasped for breath. "Oh, sure. Miss Agatha's the one who owns the goats around here." Aiden leaned against the fence with his easy grin. His shaggy hair was mussed, somehow making him even cuter. An elderly African-American woman huffed and puffed towards them. She pulled a pair of spectacles down her nose to peer at them. "Aiden Lakes, did you get my Trixie pinned up in there?" "Sure did, Miss Agatha. Had a little help from Juniper here. She's a potter from Austin." "Isn't that nice?" Miss Agatha patted Juniper's shoulder. "I'm a photographer myself. Thanks so much for helping with Trixie. I had tied her out in front of my shop, you see. People like to stop and take pictures with her. I stepped inside for a glass of water, and wouldn't you know, she chewed right through her rope. "Trixie, get over here," she yelled at the goat, who was nibbling on a yaupon tree in the center of the yard. "I'm sure if old Ed wants his shrubbery pruned, he'll do it himself." The goat stared at her for a moment, then obediently ambled over to the fence. "That's right, old girl," Agatha crooned. She slipped the fence open and grabbed the rope halter on the goat's neck. "Let's go home and have a carrot or two." She nodded to Juniper. "Thanks again. Come by after the fair and pick out a fresh bar of goat milk soap on the house." Juniper stood beside Aiden as Agatha and her pet disappeared down the street. "You act like this isn't the first time you've wrangled a goat," she said. "Well, that's life in Wimber," he chuckled. "As a park ranger, I see lots of wildlife. But people also have some crazy pets around here. Goats, potbelly pigs, even a monkey." She gasped. "You can't be serious." "Oh, yes, indeed. Lady keeps him in a giant cage that fills her whole house. She had to go to court once. It was the talk of the town." "Really? What happened?" He closed the gate and gestured to the street where they began to walk. "Seems she had the habit of taking him through a fast food drive-through without a leash. He jumped through the window and bit one of the employees." "Oh my gosh, was the employee okay?" "Yeah, but they sued anyway." He squinted. "Can't remember who won." He stopped in the middle of the street. So your booth is down this way? Uh-huh, she said, suddenly shy for him to see her work. Over here. Penny was waving goodbye to a lady with 2 full bags. Hey, everything okay with the goat? The owner was by here looking for it. Safely home, Juniper said. Did we make any sales? Yeah, 3 pinch trays and 2 journals. Penny eyed Aiden, who was examining a spoon rest. Who's your friend? She wiggled her eyebrows at Juniper. This is Aiden Lake. We met at the coffee shop, and then he helped me with the goat. Aiden, this is my roommate, Penny. Penny shook the hand Aiden offered. A true knight in shining armor. Nice to meet you. Juniper gulped. Penny usually had better luck landing dates than she did with her outgoing nature and funky style. A pleasure, said Aiden. Hey, Juniper, what did you use to glaze this? He held up the spoon rest. It's my own mixture. Juniper ran her finger along the smooth clay side. My sister came up with the first ingredients, then I improved it. Oh, so your sister is a potter as well? Was. The familiar tightness settled across Juniper's shoulders. She died 3 years ago. Car wreck. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. A silence settled over the little tent as Aiden examined every piece of pottery and watercolor print as though he were in a fine art gallery. Finally, he brought the spoon rest to Juniper. I think my mother will love this. Mother's Day is right around the corner. Oh, you don't have to buy anything, said Juniper. Hey, I know the craft fair rules. If an artist visits another booth, they are obligated to buy something. Aiden pulled a battered wallet out of his pocket. Besides, I really love your stuff, Juniper. You have a gift. Penny rolled up the spoon rest in thick paper and put it in a bag. Thanks for stopping by. Maybe we'll see you again at another craft fair. I'd like that, said Aiden, taking the bag. But he was looking at Juniper. He walked away, disappearing in the crowd. Oh, no! Juniper slapped her forehead. I totally forgot to ask him where his booth was set up. You mean he's an artist too? Said Penny. This keeps getting better and better. In a minute you're going to tell me he's single and has a good, stable job. Actually, he does, Juniper admitted. But I doubt he's interested in a mousy little pub waitress like me. Penny rolled her eyes. Oh my gosh, you're ridiculous. Of course he likes you. Why else would he buy that hideous spoon rest? If Penny hadn't been surrounded by art, Juniper would have thrown her water bottle at her. Wait till we get home, Missy. You might find your teddy bear has mysteriously vanished into the night. Not Mr. Comfy! Penny clasped her hands together. You know I'm kidding, Juniper. All your art is amazing. I'm glad he bought the spoon rest. So am I, Juniper murmured. Chapter 3 Home Musings. Juniper spun her wheel one last time, the slippery clay molding to perfect smoothness with the tiny nudge of her fingers. The neck of her vase rose up and up until it formed into what it desired to be. Her sister had taught her to let the clay become what it wanted. You direct it. You shape it, but in the end, clay makes its own choices. The end result is a surprise. Juniper tilted her head. Every memory of her sister came with the tiny smart of loss, but in the last year she'd been able to work through a portion of the dragging burden of sorrow. Colleen had been the most incredible artist she'd ever known, with her work featured in local galleries by the age of 25. She'd been her parents' favorite, but Juniper had never begrudged her that. With her quick laugh and kind heart, Colleen had been everyone's favorite. Colleen would be waiting for her in heaven, but sometimes she wished she could ask for her opinion on a piece or a glazing method or a design just one more time. No one else ever understood her work or could offer more helpful criticism than her big sister. The wheel slowed and stopped. Juniper slid a fishing line through the base of the piece to cut it free. She wiped the excess moisture from the sides and placed it on her drying shelf to join the other items she'd made in the last few days. Her eyes strayed to the registration form she'd been filling out. Penny had signed them up for a bigger-than-usual event. Watermelon Fest was 2 hours away, had promised crowds in the thousands, and, most concerning, had cost them $200. They'd never spent close to that amount on a booth. But Penny had spoken to several other artists who'd attended previous years, and they all said it was worth it. Her phone rested on the counter by the potter's wheel. She really should call her mother. It had been over a month, but she hasn't bothered to call me either. Tensions were high since she'd broken up with Nick, her family interactions cold and distant. Not to mention her mother had a nasty habit of bringing him up. Her comments were always breezy and complimentary. "Have you heard Nick's new song on YouTube? It's amazing," or "You won't believe where Nick's band played last night." Juniper sighed. Why can't my parents realize I made the best choice? Nick can have his groupies. I'd rather be alone than be with a cheater, and that's that. Her latest projects lined the firing shelf. The vase, more spoon rests since they'd proven popular, pinch pots and dishes in unusual shapes. Nothing big, but things that were easy to finish and had been quick sellers in the past. A craft fair artist's lot. Nothing too flashy and expensive, just producers of steady sales. I suppose I should be thankful for a hobby that can sustain itself. She eyed her gorgeous $400 pitcher high up and safe on its non-craft fair day shelf. Her mind strayed to Aiden like it had insisted on doing several times in the last 2 months. She wondered if he'd given her a second thought. Did he even have a way to contact me? Did I slip a card into his bag? If he was interested, wouldn't he have said something? Perhaps he was the kind of man who gave things time. Isn't that what I want? I wouldn't have known what to say on our first meeting anyway. Maybe he sensed that. He doesn't even know if I'm single. For all he knows, I could be married with 2 children. The thought made her laugh out loud as she cleaned up her pottery wheel and workspace. Someday she wanted kids. But not yet. Absolutely not yet. Nick had always talked about trying for children right away. Secretly, she'd wanted to wait a few years and enjoy her marriage before they jumped into parenthood, but she'd never dared to argue with him. That should have been the biggest red flag, not his cheating. I couldn't disagree without worrying about a temper tantrum. And what kind of parent would he be? Leaving me to take care of everything while he goes out with the band every night? Penny came through the apartment door talking on her phone. She threw her purse on the counter, gave a laughing goodbye, and hung up. "Oh, are those your new things?" She went over to the pottery shelf. "Yep. Don't touch, though. Everything's still drying. I'll take 'em to the kiln soon." Penny sat down and rested her chin on her hands. "Sounds good. Maybe someday we'll have a real studio where I can paint the biggest canvas in the world and you can have your own kiln." In our dreams. Besides, the kiln I want is over $2,000. We'd need an enormous craft show to take care of that. Penny shrugged. "It's my dream. I can conjure up anything I want, right?" "I suppose." Juniper's gaze rested on the tall pile of bills on the counter by the cookie jar. The craft fair and weekend tips better be good, or I might be studioless and homeless. Chapter 4. Heat. Many Saturday mornings later, Juniper and Penny unloaded Juniper's beat-up RAV4 before the sun had even finished peeking up over the hill. The spot they'd been given at the event was near the front, a handy space if the crowd tired in the heat of the day and didn't quite make it down the 4-block section of booths. Juniper set down the chair she'd hauled and rubbed her bleary eyes. She'd pulled a double at the pub last night to negotiate the Saturday off. Fortunately, the tips had topped off the rent money she needed before Monday. "Did you pack the tent weights?" Penny said as she consulted her never-ending list. "Yep, sure did." "Good. Those things are heavy. Our tent shouldn't be going anywhere." "Hope not." Juniper squinted up at the trees. "Don't feel the slightest breeze. Nice not to worry about the tent flying away, but we're going to be hot." Penny sneezed. "Gosh, the minute I get outside, these allergies start up." "Did you take your medication?" asked Juniper. "Totally forgot. Too much in my brain, I guess." Penny dropped the wagon handle. "Do you mind hauling this load? I'll run back to the car and take a pill so I won't be sneezing all day." "Good plan." Juniper pulled their wagon to the place where they'd piled the rest of their supplies. The July day was already a scorcher, but at least they'd situated their booth under the shade. Most of the vendors were assigned to places beneath the trees with a shaded path for customers to stroll between the stalls. "Hey, I didn't know you would be here," came a familiar voice. Aidan Lakes waved at Juniper from 3/10 down, then walked over in slow, easy strides. "Hi." Juniper's heart did a little flip-flop. The picture she'd held in her heart these past few months didn't do the in-person Aidan justice. He wore simple khaki shorts, a dry-weave t-shirt, and battered Nikes. "Good to see you again," he said. "I couldn't remember your last name, and I didn't get a card from you at the Wimber Fair." Oh, you didn't?" Juniper stammered, trying to gather her thoughts. "I hope everything was okay with the spoon rest." "Yeah, of course. My mom loved it so much she wanted to buy a few for friends and maybe get something else with the same pattern. She wants to revamp her kitchen and use the lilac and cream as her muse colors or something like that. She didn't take it kindly when I admitted I didn't get your contact info." "Oh, let me get you a card now." Juniper turned and stared at the pile of boxes. She held up her hands. "I'm a little disorganized at the moment. Can I get back to you with that?" "Sure." Aidan leaned back against a giant oak beside their space. "Would you like some help? My booth is all set up." "I'd say yes, but Penny should be coming with the last load any second, and she's particular about everything being perfect. Our apartment is a wreck, so you wouldn't think she was OCD, but she is about certain—" "Hey there, Aidan," Penny said from behind Juniper, making her jump. "Don't you listen to her. She's the one who wants the booth set up a certain way. But it doesn't take long. We've done it so many times it's like a dance routine." "Hip-hop or ballet?" Aidan said with a grin. "Some kind of interpretive number," said Penny. "If we took it to a college, we'd probably get some kind of special scholarship." "That would be the day," said Juniper. "All right, if you're sure you don't need help." Aidan eyed the towering piles. "But holler if you need something. And you," he patted Juniper's shoulder, "don't forget to bring that card over when you find it." "Of course." Juniper waved. "I need to come look at your stuff. I didn't get a chance in Wimber with the goat chases and all." "Oh, yeah?" Aidan grinned and walked off. As they pulled the Easy Up apart to set out the legs, Penny gave her a sly smile. "So, he wants your business card, does he?" Heat crept up Juniper's face to her annoyance. "His mother wants to order a few custom pieces from me, that's all." "Uh-huh." Penny took a swig from her energy drink. "It's just a coincidence that your phone number or Facebook page or some other point of contact is on there. I think he likes you." Juniper clipped the last leg into place. "Whatever. I mean, maybe he does." Penny glanced over at Aidan's booth, where he was already talking to a customer. "Would you go out with him if he asked?" she whispered. "I don't know," Juniper whispered back. "I mean, it's been a while. Nick was so awful, though. And I don't know much about Aidan. How he feels about Faith, for instance." "Yeah, that's kind of important." Penny pulled out a table and stood it up. "What are we going for? L-shape? U? We have 3 tables. What shall we do with them?" "Whatever allows in the most breeze," said Juniper. Sweat was already beginning to trickle down the back of her simple summer dress. "You're telling me." Penny waved a flyer she'd grabbed from another booth, but it didn't do much to cool them off. The day progressed with huge crowds as promised. Items flew off the shelf, and when Juniper did a quick count at noon, they'd already made twice what they paid for the booth. "I guess it was worth it," said Penny. Juniper studied her roommate's face. Her normally porcelain skin was bright pink, and she stared at the change box with listless eyes. "Hey, are you okay?" Juniper asked. "Yeah. Would you grab me another energy drink, though? They're selling them at the hot dog booth. Just need a pep up." Juniper looked behind the table. On the ground around Penny's chair was an empty energy drink container and 2 soda cans. "Have you had any water at all today?" "Are you my mother or what?" Penny said in a teasing voice. Fine, I'll get you a drink. I want to stop by Aidan's booth anyway." Juniper went to Aidan's bright blue tent. His area was surrounded by 3 wooden pallets that served as walls with beautiful crosses hanging from them. Some crosses had Bible verses, while some were decorated with mosaics of glass, colored shells, and beads. A line of lathe-formed polished wooden bowls covered one table, and polished cutting boards filled another. Aidan sat behind the counter reading a copy of C.S. Lewis's book, Till We Have Faces. He jumped up as Juniper approached. "Hello, ma'am. Can I interest you in a stick or stone?" "Hi." Juniper touched a polished bowl. Wow, everything is so beautiful. And I love your use of scripture. Do you go to church in Wimber? Aiden nodded. Wimber County Community. It's an interdenominational church. Do you have a church family? Church? Well, I went with my parents before I moved out. My family has always been Baptist, but I haven't tried to find a church home in Austin. I have prayer time and read my Bible and everything. It's just going by myself. Yeah. He studied her face, and she felt like he was reading the depths of her soul. I moved to Wimber when I was 22 and accepted the park ranger position. It took me a while to get the guts to even visit a strange church. But I met the youth pastors, a married couple named Grayson and Sammy. They invited me to come, and it was so perfect. He held out a hand. Hey, if you're ever in town on a Sunday, you should check it out. Sure, that would be great. Juniper blinked a few times, wondering if a church invitation could be counted as asking someone out. Probably just being nice. I saw your book. She changed the subject. I've read the Narnia series, but never that one. Is it good? He held up the very creased and dog-eared copy. My favorite of all time. I used to write the date down on the front cover every time I read it, but after about 6 times I stopped. That good, huh? The only book I've read more than once was the Bible, and maybe Little Women. You should give it a try. He pressed the novel into her hands. Oh, no, I couldn't take your book. I'll get a copy at the library. No, take it. I'll buy another copy. It's so good. I think everyone should read it at least once, especially Christians. You can give it back next quarter's show in Wimber. You are coming, right? All right, I'll try it. We do hope to attend the fall show in Wimber, so I should have time to read it before then. She stuffed the book in her purse. And here's the card I promised you. He took it, glanced at it, pulled out his phone, and began tapping on the screen. Just putting in your number in case I misplace this. I'm terrible about losing things. I could have paid for a cruise with the money I've spent replacing missing keys. Juniper picked up a polished wooden bookmark and traced the polished surface with a fingertip. I'd like to purchase this, please. Oh, no, it's only $5. You can have it. Craft fair rules, she shot back. That's fair. He laughed and wrapped it up in brown paper. He leaned his chin on his hand. So I know you're here with Penny, but I keep hearing about this amazing barbecue place. Juniper! Penny's voice called from the crowd. She sounded weak and far away. Juniper glanced up to see her friend walking towards Aiden's tent. Her face was white and her eyes were glazed over. She stumbled forward and fell in a crumpled heap on the ground. Chapter 5. Talk and Sauce. Penny! Juniper ran forward and skidded to the ground beside her friend. She grabbed her hand. Penny's skin was cold and clammy. Her eyelashes fluttered. Juniper, she groaned, then fell back, quiet. Aiden rushed to their patch of grass and kneeled beside Penny. Looks like heat exhaustion. Happens at the park where I work all the time. We'd better try to find the first aid tent. Do they have one here? Juniper glanced through the impossible sea of multicolored tents. I'm not sure. I've never been to this event, but with this many people there must be something. Aiden pulled out his phone. I'll call 911. Why don't you try to find a way to cool her down in the meantime? We need to elevate her feet. At least we're in the shade here. Juniper tore herself away from her friend's side and ran to their booth. Where is that cooler? She muttered. Gotcha. She flipped it open. She grabbed a handful of paper towels and a baggie of ice. Feet elevation. She found a backpack. By now, a crowd was beginning to gather. Juniper ignored the barrage of shouted suggestions and pushed through to reach her friend. Penny was still unresponsive as Juniper shoved the backpack beneath her sandaled feet. Juniper dabbed at her forehead with the paper towel. Penny, can you talk to me? To her supreme relief, Penny's eyes fluttered open. She gave Juniper a glazed stare. Tired, she mumbled. Head hurts. Yes, she's talking now, but her breathing is pretty shallow, Aiden was telling someone on the phone. Yes, I can stay on the line until the ambulance gets here. Juniper squeezed Penny's hand. Help is on the way. You'll be all right. Yes, sir. Please tell them we are close to the blue and red tents near the entrance, Aiden said. Penny's eyes closed again. Penny! Penny! Juniper shook her shoulders. Aiden, she's not responding anymore. Within moments, a siren blared through the trees. An ambulance pulled into the space between Juniper and Aiden's tent. 2 paramedics jumped out, bags in hand. Help is here, Juniper said, hoping she spoke the truth. Flashbacks came to her mind of when her sister had been in the accident. She'd been in a coma for 3 days and never woke up. Lord, I can't lose my best friend, too. I just can't. Please save her. As the male ambulance worker took Penny's pulse and vitals, the woman turned to Juniper and asked for Penny's name and age. She entered these into a handheld tablet and then looked up. Does your friend have diabetes, low blood sugar, or a history of seizures? Juniper shook her head, her eyes swimming with tears. No, I have known her for years, and she's been healthy all that time. The man glanced over. Has she had anything unusual to eat or taken any medication today? Drugs, prescription, or otherwise? Juniper's mind raced. Wait a minute. I do think she took some allergy medicine this morning, but it's the same kind she always takes. The woman tucked her tablet back into its pouch. That might be part of the problem, then. Certain allergy medications make people more sensitive to heat, even if the person stays in the shade. I also saw her with an energy drink, Aiden offered. The man nodded. Too much caffeine can cause dehydration, especially energy drinks which contain more than the average beverage. He nodded to the other worker. Let's get her on the stretcher. Tears flowed down Juniper's cheeks as the workers put Penny on the gurney and loaded her into the ambulance. By now 100 or more people had gathered at a respectful distance to view the event. Aiden reached over and squeezed Juniper's hand. Everything's going to be okay. Juniper resisted the urge to bury her head in his broad shoulder. I hope so. He put his arm around her. I'm praying with you, okay? Juniper exhaled and leaned into his side hug. At least I have someone else here that I kind of know. It would be so much harder if Penny and I were doing this event alone like we usually do. The woman driver came back. We have your friend on an IV and ready to go. Would you like to ride with me in the front? Oh, Juniper blinked. I would, but I don't know what I'd do with our stand. Aiden cleared his throat. I have a few friends in this town. I'll call and see if someone will come help load up your stuff. If you trust me, you can give me the keys to your car and we'll get you sorted out. Craft fair will be over in a few hours anyway. Oh, would you? Juniper clasped her hands. She ran and found her purse, grabbed the keys, and handed them to Aiden. Charcoal RAV4 in the vendor's parking area. Thank you so much. He smiled. I've got it. Don't worry. I have your phone number. I'll call you later. Go be with your friend. Third phone call, third voicemail. Juniper hung the phone up and sighed, resting her head against the hospital wall. Penny would be fine. She looked pale and weak on the stark white pillow, but the IV had done its job. The doctor said she needed to stay overnight for observation, but she should be fine to go home the next day. Her parents were driving in from Dallas, but should arrive at any time. But now Juniper faced a problem. How would she get back to the craft fair to pick up all their stuff and her vehicle? She'd tried calling her parents and a few friends, but no one answered. The craft fair ended an hour ago. Aiden said I could trust him. She wanted to believe, but after being burned by the man she trusted most in the world, it was a hard thing to do. What if he just left everything out there? Will the event runners throw it all in the trash? The very thought of all her hard work being junked sent a shiver down her spine. After an eternity, Penny's parents, Pam and Larry, walked into the waiting room. Pam glanced around the room, then smiled as her eyes lit on Juniper. She rushed over and gave her a hug. Goodness, Juniper, it's so good to see you. Thank you for taking care of our baby girl. Have you been in to see her? Asked Juniper. She's awake. Of course, but she was so plum-tuckered we decided we'd go ahead and find a hotel room and come back later, said Pam. Larry, any luck? Larry, a thin, tall man with a severe comb-over, looked up from his phone. Yes, dear. Don't have much to choose from in this tiny town, but there is a Best Western 3 miles away. Pam sighed and pulled her own phone from her rhinestone-studded purse. I suppose it'll have to do. Juniper, can you tell us what y'all were doing in the middle of this nowhere town in the first place? We had a booth at the Watermelon Festival. Juniper sighed. Penny's parents were less supportive of their daughter's art than even her own mom and dad, which was hard to imagine. Speaking of which, do you think maybe one of you could give me a ride? Pam's penciled eyebrows arched upward. Juniper's phone glowed with a new call. She didn't recognize the number. Please excuse me, it might be the fair coordinator. She stepped into the hall. Hello? Hey there, is this Juniper? Came Aiden's voice. Oh, yes, she breathed. How's Penny? Hope she's all right. Yes, thank goodness, she's fine. Her parents are here. Good, good. Hey, you're at the hospital on the edge of town, right? The little bitty one? Yeah. We were lucky they had an extra bed because they want to keep Penny overnight. Otherwise, they might have been forced to transport her to the city. Speaking of transportation, do you have a ride back here to the craft fair? Juniper sighed. Not yet. I was hoping to somehow catch a Lyft or Uber, but I doubt there's any drivers out here. He laughed. Yeah, don't really see that happening. How about looking out the front doors of check-in? Juniper trudged through the hall and past the giant moon-shaped desk. A big silver pickup truck was parked in front of visitor parking. Aiden waved from the driver's side. He was wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Juniper waved back and hurried to Penny's parents. I suppose I won't need a ride after all. Please keep me updated. Tell Penny everything at the fair is taken care of. I'll be driving home tonight with all our stuff. Larry blinked. Sounds good to me. You be careful out there, darlin', said Pam. As Juniper ran out to the truck, she felt anything but cautious. I'm driving off with a guy I've only met twice. I don't know how many wrecks he's been in. He might even have a criminal record. Somehow, despite these thoughts, she felt safe. Hey there, said Aiden as she slid into the dark leather seat. The scent of sawdust and honey and toast enveloped her as she shut the door. Hi. Thanks for picking me up. You didn't have to do that. He rubbed the back of his neck. Yes, I absolutely did. I couldn't leave you stranded like that. It's impossible to find a taxi or a rideshare out here, and the craft fair is only 10 minutes away. Your keys are there, by the way. He nodded to the dashboard where her strawberry shortcake keychain glinted in the sun. She stuck them in her purse. Thank you so much. I'm sorry you had to deal with our stuff. He waved his free hand. Like I said, I have a few friends in town. Retired couple came out and ran your booth for the last few hours. I put your money in the car. They said they made over 300. Not sure what they sold, though. 300. Juniper did a quick calculation. That means we had a $700 day. Pretty good. You made more than me, said Aiden. Now, I didn't want to be pushy or anything, but there is a fantastic barbecue place on the way back. Would you like some dinner? With me? Juniper's mouth watered, and suddenly her stomach seemed very, very empty. Goodness, I just realized I haven't eaten anything since 6 o'clock this morning. Yes, that would be great. Thank you again. Aiden smiled. They pulled up to a place that looked more like a ramshackle barn than a restaurant, but as a lifetime Texan, Juniper knew looks could be deceiving. Aiden came around, opened the door for her, and helped her out. His grip lingered on her hand. Oops, forgot my purse. She let go and reached back into the car. Part of her wished she hadn't, but the cautious half of her heart continued to beat a weakening warning. You've been hurt before. It might happen again. She followed him to the sheet metal door, and he swung it open. The tables and chairs were made from raw-cut, dark-stained wood. Country music blared from an old-fashioned jukebox, and most of the dozen tables were occupied by what appeared to be truckers, bikers, and country couples coming to town for their Saturday lunch. Aiden went over to the counter and peered at the giant chalkboard menu. Looks like we have a choice between brisket, sausage, chicken, or here's a sampler plate with all three called the Big Boy Special. I'll have a chicken sandwich and a side of potato salad, please, Juniper told the bored-looking woman behind the counter. She pulled out her wallet. Let me get it, said Aiden. Okay. Juniper felt a warmth spread through her. This really is a date. He's not just being nice. Aiden nudged her shoulder. You want to eat outside? There's a little picnic area to the side of the building. Sun's setting and they have a giant fan out there. Sounds good to me. Aiden carried their laden tray through the door. The outside was set up like a courtyard garden with flower boxes and a small fountain in the middle. The trickling water created a melodic atmosphere that made a welcoming change to the chaotic day. This table over here all right? He gestured. Great. Juniper sank down thankfully. You want to pray? Aiden said. Sure. Juniper closed her eyes and said a few nervous words about Penny making a full recovery and thanks for the food. She didn't always remember to pray for her meals since her life was so crazy, and she certainly wasn't used to praying out loud in front of a handsome guy on the first date. They tackled the heaping plates. They weren't kidding about this being a great place, said Aiden. That sauce has the perfect blend of sweet and spicy. I agree, said Juniper. He rested his chin on folded hands and studied her with bright eyes. So, how long have you been creating pottery? And is that your main job, or do you work somewhere else? No, I work in a pub as a waitress with Penny. Aiden buttered a roll. That must be a fascinating job. You'd meet all kinds of interesting people, especially in Austin. Oh, yes, it has been. You'd be surprised by the stories I hear, said Juniper. It's hard work, but I make good tips, and I enjoy being there most of the time. What about you? How did you decide to be a park ranger? My mom. She's worked for the Wimber State Park for the last 20 years. She'd always taken me hiking and taught me about all the animals and birds. Oh, that's nice. Does she still work there? Yep. She and my dad live in the park. That would be so peaceful. They think so, he chuckled. Except when the park officials decide to do a controlled burn. Everyone gets a little nervous with those since we've had so many fires in the last few years. I can't even imagine, said Juniper. There's nothing like walking down the trails on my patrols. You'll have to come out to the park sometime. It's absolutely beautiful. As Aiden talked, his eyes danced. He's so full of joy and life. Maybe if I could move out of the city, I'd be able to find peace somehow. I don't know. He's strong in his faith. I need to find a church. Wow, would you look at that sky? Aiden pointed up behind her. Juniper turned and gasped. The clouds were piled up in fairy-like structures with glints of pink and gold from the sunset. In the middle were delicate, feathery clouds forming what looked like an angel with arms and wings stretched out. That's amazing, Aiden breathed. It's perfect, isn't it? Juniper nodded. Aiden pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos. I'm always looking for beauty in nature. You never know what can inspire a new art piece. For sure, said Juniper. I've been working on a new design with the pine trees of Wimber, but it's not quite ready yet. Nothing says Wimber like pine trees. Can't wait to see it. They finished supper, hopped back in the truck, and drove to the festival grounds. Most of the vehicles were gone. Aiden drove to the RAV4, which sat all by itself in the middle of the parking lot. He came around and opened the door for her again. When Juniper hopped out, she leaned her head back to catch the last streaks of color from the setting sun. A star or two emerged as she watched, and a sliver of moon looked down on all. Cheshire Cat Moon, said Aiden. Because it looks like his smile, murmured Juniper. She turned to face him. Thank you so much for everything. I don't know how I would have made it through today without you. Aiden dipped his head. My pleasure. I beat myself up so bad for not grabbing your card at the last fair. He took her hand. Look, I know this is fast, but I've learned not to miss opportunities. Can I call you? Can we get together again soon? I don't know, Juniper blurted, then was filled with instant regret. She didn't pull her hand away, and he didn't let go. Listen, have I come on too strong? He stared into her eyes. I felt like there was a connection between us, but I can admit it if I'm wrong. No, it's not that, she sighed deeply. I went through a bad breakup about 8 months ago. I'm still kind of dealing with it. He lifted a tentative finger and ran it along the curve of her cheek. I'm sorry to hear that. You didn't deserve that kind of pain. Tears stung the corners of her eyes, and she bowed her head. You seem like a great person, and you've been so nice to me. I just need some time, okay? Okay. He gently released her hand and shuffled a few steps away. You have my number. Call me if you want. Or come to Wimber for church sometime. They'd love to have you." "Sure, yeah, sounds good." Juniper's heart thudded against her rib cage. Why can't I take a leap? "Thanks again," she said lamely. "I'll see you in Wimber for the fall show, if not sooner." "All right." His lips curved up at the corners. "Promise me. You'll think about it?" "I will." Juniper unlocked the RAV4 and climbed in. She turned the car on, watching Aiden walk away in the dusky headlights. God, I don't know what to do. Please help me to work through this fear and move on with my life. It's not like Nick and I were married. I have to trust you to give me discernment. Aiden turned and stared at the car. Sweet of him to make sure it starts okay. Her father always did that when she visited. Nick never did. She eased her foot off the brake and headed down the rocky driveway from the park. Chapter 6. Crash. "Goodbye," Juniper said to the little girl in a pumpkin costume. She closed the door and flipped off the outside light. "That's the last of our candy," she said to Penny, who lounged on the couch watching TV. "Just as well." Penny shut off the TV and tossed the remote on the coffee table. "I'm exhausted." "Yeah, and we have the fair tomorrow," said Juniper. "Of course. How could I forget?" Penny stretched and yawned. The two had agreed to wait until the weather grew cool before attempting another craft fair. But Halloween had come like a freight train, and the Wimber quarterly market days was tomorrow. Penny's bout with heat exhaustion had left her unscathed for the most part. She'd come home the next day, and besides being a little bit tired for the week, bounced back quickly. Juniper took an extra shift or two at the pub until she could work again, and everything had gone back to normal. "I'll be glad to go back to Wimber," said Juniper. "Oh, I bet you will," said Penny, giving her a sly smile. Juniper threw a couch cushion at her. "I already told you. I doubt Aiden will want anything to do with me, even if I do see him. The poor guy. I've already rejected him, and he doesn't seem to be the kind of person to put up with that for too long." It hadn't been for lack of trying. Aiden had called her once and left a message because she'd been at work. She hadn't returned his call. Then he texted her to remind her about church. She wanted to go, but she hadn't been able to get a Sunday off. She wanted to text him. She wanted to call him. I don't know what I want. "I suppose I'd better get this stuff packed up," she said, eyeing her latest creations on the shelf, fresh from the kiln. She'd made a few turkey-themed items. Not silly or cartoonish birds, but whimsical fowl with sweeping, earth-toned feathers. She grabbed a plastic bin and a handful of bubble wrap and began slowly packing the pottery. I wish I'd had time to make more. The vision for her Christmas dishes hadn't quite solidified, but she was leaning towards candy cane-striped wassail cups and cookie plates. "What are your plans for Christmas this year?" she asked Penny. Going to my folks, I guess. Want to come?" Juniper packed a soap dish. "Don't take this the wrong way, but I always feel weird over there. Your house is so ginormous, and the decorations are so—" "Santa's village at the mall," suggested Penny. "That's the perfect description," said Juniper. "Yeah, but I love it." Penny squeezed her couch cushion, burrowing her chin in the top. "My dad has always decorated to the nines. We love it, of course, but I think he mostly does it to drive my mom crazy." She gave Juniper a slanted glance. "Are you saying you aren't going home at all?" "Probably not." Swirls of emotion swept through Juniper's mind. "I'm tired of my mother going on and on about Nick, and my dad pestering me about my art and when I'm going to look for a real job. I don't think I'll ever be able to make my parents happy, and I'm done trying." She swiped the dust from the top of a pinch pot. "Besides, Christmas hasn't been the same since Colleen died." "I'm sorry you're dealing with all that," said Penny. "But please come with me, at least. You shouldn't spend Christmas by yourself." "I'll think about it," said Juniper. Juniper finished packing all the pottery and counting out 1s and 5s for the change box. Her eyes kept straying to her phone, almost hoping it would glow with Aiden's number again. Why would I want him to keep trying? He's obviously gotten my hint and is respecting my wishes for space. But why do I want space? He's perfect. And I might never find someone like that again. She groaned out loud, resting her head against the wall. Yeah, you're crazy, Penny said from the couch. Red and pink streaks of sunrise stained vermilion clouds on the drive to Wimber. Penny put in a Christmas CD and sang along. It's not even Thanksgiving yet, Juniper yelled. Day after Halloween means the Christmas season has officially begun, Penny said. I hope everyone doesn't feel that way, since I'd really like to sell my turkey stuff. Your turkeys are so gorgeous, people will want them all year, said Penny. The welcoming sign for Wimber loomed ahead, and Juniper's stomach twisted. Would Aiden be there? Of course he will. As they unloaded and began to set up, twisty little breezes tugged at Juniper's dress. She was glad she'd braided her hair up today. Crafters buzzed around them, preparing tents and tables. In the distance, a jazzy version of Jingle Bells played. I guess I'm not going to be able to evade the Christmas spirit, said Juniper. Nope, said Penny cheerfully. She jerked her neck to the side. I saw Aiden, she said in a stage whisper. He's 6 booths down. Juniper's throat tightened. What will I do if I see him? I feel so bad. What is wrong with me? Her shoulders sagged. If he's really such a great guy, he'll understand. He might not want to have anything to do with me, but at least he'll understand. You can't explain heartache until you've been through it. They set up the shelter with the obligatory weights on all 4 legs and then put everything else in place. Business was brisk, with people purchasing early Christmas presents. To Juniper's delight, she sold several turkey items. Aiden didn't come by, though Juniper saw his bright red sweater through the crowd several times as he helped people at his own booth. During a brief lull in the mid-morning, Penny rubbed her hands together. Brr, it's getting colder. I'm going to fetch my jacket from the car. Do you want yours? Yeah, that would be nice. I don't remember it being this cold in early November in a long time. Sure, but it's Texas, said Penny. She wandered off in the direction of the parking lot. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the tent, scattering their flyers and business cards. Shouts and oaths could be heard from people in the other booths as lighter items were blown off shelves and pegs. Oh, this is not going to be good, Juniper muttered. One of the drawbacks of having an outdoor booth. Texas weather was completely unpredictable. Penny came back and tossed over Juniper's Hello Kitty hoodie. Wow, this wind is something, huh? And no mention of rain or anything in the weather. You know how that goes, said Juniper, pulling the hoodie over her head. Another gust rolled over the street. A few of Penny's prints fell on their easels. I think maybe I'll stack these over on this table for now, said Penny, gathering up the pictures. At least until this crazy wind dies down. Mothers walked past, children huddled beneath their jackets. Scraps of paper and leaves skittered along the street, swirling into dust devils. The temperature continued to fall. Penny pointed to the crochet lady's tent. They're doing some brisk business today. I bet they sell out of hats and scarves. I'm tempted to go and buy my own set, said Juniper through chattering teeth. Go ahead, said Penny. We've made pretty good money today. As Juniper stepped away, the strongest gust yet howled through the lane. Penny yelped and jumped out from under the canopy. Together they watched as the whole thing buckled and crashed to the ground, taking shelves and tables with it. Pottery crashed and tinkled. A sickening knot twisted in Juniper's stomach. All around them more tents bucked and jumped, some wrenching free of their tethers. People shrieked and called out to each other. The canopy lay on the ground, twisted and forlorn like a dead spider. Broken bits of pottery rolled out from all sides. Tears stung the corners of Juniper's eyes, and for a moment she stayed frozen to the street. Oh no, Penny whispered. I didn't think anything could be worse than last time, but I was wrong. Aiden ran over to them. Hey, I wanted to check. He stopped short. Oh man. He slipped in by Juniper's side and took her hand. I'm so sorry. Juniper squeezed his hand back. Thanks, she said glumly. Penny walked over to the cover. I almost can't bear to look, she groaned, but we have to clean this up. Yeah, might as well see what's left. Juniper let go of Aiden's hand reluctantly and went to the other side of the mangled canopy. She and Penny lifted it back. It was worse than she could have imagined. Almost every piece of pottery was shattered. Even the board holding the small magnets had fallen flat on the cement, and the little clay squares were cracked and broken. The glass had shattered on Penny's few framed pieces, and some of her prints had been bent, but for the most part her works were unscathed. Aiden grabbed a trash bag and began to pick up pottery shards. "Don't you need to watch your booth?" asked Juniper. "No, I took mine down after that first big gust," said Aiden. "I've dealt with too many windy days in the past." He glanced up. "Sorry." Juniper joined him, picking up shards on the ground. Months of work, everything she'd made for Thanksgiving, gone. Even the items she'd finally made with the beautiful pine pattern she'd envisioned the last time she'd been in Wimber. All destroyed. Tears flowed freely down her face. She choked back sobs. Aiden gave her sympathetic glances, but he didn't say anything. He probably doesn't know what to say. I wouldn't know if our places were reversed. The three finally cleaned up everything. Penny sighed. "Well, the biggest table is broken beyond repair, but at least the rest of the shelves and smaller tables are okay. We'll have to buy a new canopy." Juniper couldn't talk. The lump in her throat had grown too big. Aiden put a trash bag full of broken pottery into a large cardboard box. "Is there anything else I can do for you?" he asked. "Not right now," said Juniper miserably. "Thank you, again, for rescuing us. Again." "All right." Aiden gave a deep sigh. "I'm so terribly sorry." He picked up the box of trash. "Hey," he glanced up. "You can call me if you want." "I know," said Juniper, feeling like the most cruel and horrible human being of all time. As they prepared to load their salvaged items into the car, one of the crochet ladies ran up to Juniper, cradling something in her arms. "This rolled into our booth and I thought you'd want it." Her eyes crinkled at the corners. "You poor dears, I'm so sorry." "Thanks," Juniper said, her voice cracking. She took the precious black and purple vase from the elderly woman. "Penny, look at this," she gasped. "Am I seeing things?" Penny took the vase and held it up, examining it at every angle. "Nope. It's not your imagination. There's not a crack or chip to be seen. Somehow it escaped completely unharmed." As they drove away from Wimber, Juniper hugged the vase close. "That's it. No more craft fairs for me. Ever." Chapter 7. Christmas. 2 days before Christmas. Juniper turned over in her bed, staring at the Hello Kitty lamp on her side dresser. Her old-fashioned digital clock flashed 7:59. Why did I wake up so early? She'd worked a late shift at the pub and generally would have slept in for 2 more hours. Her phone buzzed on the table, and that's when she realized what had woken her. She grabbed it without checking the number. "Juniper, honey?" Her mother's voice was a bit garbled. "Yeah," Juniper mumbled. Why didn't I check the caller ID? "Sorry to call so early. I know you sleep in on Saturday morning, but I'd like to meet with you. Could we do breakfast at the cafe down the street? The one we went to the last time I visited? 9-ish? Mom, you know I don't do 9-ish. Her mother let out a long sigh. "I know, but it's my treat and it's important. Could you please come?" It was Juniper's turn to sigh. "Will you promise not to bring up Nick, Mom? Not even once, please?" There was a long pause. "Yes, of course." Juniper blinked in the bright winter sunlight as she locked her car and headed to the small cafe. "At least I'll get free coffee." Her mother folded her menu as Juniper approached the tall leather booth in the old-fashioned diner. She rose and gave her a hug, her silver charm bracelets jangling. One of the bracelets had been a Christmas gift from Juniper with her and her sister's birthstones. She hadn't seen her mother wear it in a while. Not since Colleen died. The waitress, a wizened woman with straggling hair thrown up in a bun, came to the table and gave them a side smile. "Good morning, ladies. What can I get for you today?" "Coffee," they both said in unison, then laughed. "Well, I'm glad you agree on that," the lady said. She flipped open a notepad. "And what would you like beside that?" The waitress took their order. Juniper's mother emptied a package of pink sweetener into her coffee and stirred it. "Again, I'm sorry for waking you so early, but I wanted you to know I've spent quite a bit of time in prayer." "Really?" Juniper blinked. Her mother didn't mention prayer much, unless she was asking someone to bless the food at a holiday meal. Her mother reached out and touched her hand. "I've been going to a therapist, and I realized..." To Juniper's shock, a tear dribbled down her face, streaking through the perfect makeup. "I realized I haven't completely worked through the pain of Colleen's death, and somehow I think I've been taking it out on you." "Mom, really?" The suddenness of this statement wrenched Juniper's heart. "Yes." Her mother stared down at her empty place setting. "I couldn't support your pottery because it was too much like hers. At first, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I had a hard time even talking to you. You look so much like her." Juniper nodded slowly. People often thought she and Colleen were twins, even though her sister was 3 years older. More tears fell, and her mother fumbled in her purse, pulling out a handful of tissues. "None, and I mean absolutely none of that was your fault. When you were with Nick, I thought it would be so great for you to have someone make you happy after everything that happened. The relationship became a distraction for all of us, I think." "Yeah," said Juniper slowly. "I understand why it would be that way." "When you found out what you did," said her mother, "I was furious with him, but I took it out on you. See the pattern here? I'm so messed up." She picked at the napkin in front of her. "My therapist says it's a normal reaction to grief, but I'm not okay with being this way." The waitress arrived with their food, and Juniper choked down her French toast, trying to think of something, anything to say. Between bites, as though she was hoping for a brief word, a tiny clue to how she felt, but Juniper couldn't speak. Time passed, and the silence prevailed. The waitress came back, glanced at each of them, and left the check without a word. Juniper felt sorry for her. She knew how awkward it was to be a server for people in a heated discussion. At least we're not a couple in the middle of a breakup. One time she'd narrowly missed being hit by a flying soft pretzel meant for a cheating boyfriend. Her mother paid the check. They rose at the same time and walked outside together. Her mother reached for her arm. "Juniper, I understand if it's going to take some time. My therapist told me it would. But please don't hate me." Finally, the tears that had been swelling behind Juniper's eyes for the entire lunch began to flow. "Mom, you know I could never hate you. But when you don't respect my wishes, it's hard to know what to do." "Honey, I'm so sorry." Her mother folded her into an enveloping hug. "I promised to never, ever do that again. And Dad promised me he wouldn't either." She stepped back, steadying her face. "Juniper, please, come home for Christmas. It's lonely without you. Dad and I will give you space, I promise. Let's just try, can we?" "I'll let you know tomorrow," said Juniper. Juniper loaded the final items in her car. Christmas had proven to be a healing time, and she and her parents had laughed and cried around the Christmas tree, swapping stories and watching old family movies. Her dad had actually sat her down for a heart-to-heart, similar to the one she'd had with her mother. She realized that the last thing her sister would have wanted was the rift in the family, and she promised her parents she would also go to therapy. As Juniper drove past a drugstore, she slapped her forehead. "Better stop and get those antacid tablets I told Penny I'd replace." She walked into the barrage of after-Christmas clearance. The antacid tablets were, of course, at the very back of the store. She meandered to the aisle and searched for her preferred brand. As she picked up the box and headed to the front of the store, she passed a familiar denim jacket. Nick. Of course he would be here. After such a wonderful Christmas. Do I really have to deal with this now? Maybe if I tiptoe by, but the bottle of pills shifted in her basket, rattling. Nick tapped her shoulder and she whirled around. His hair fell in front of his face in that cute, boyish style he'd had since 9th grade, and he smiled that smile that always hit the deepest part of her soul. "Hey, Junie," he drawled. "Had a gig at the boot scraper last night. Got a bit of a hangover, so I thought I'd grab some Tylenol." He held up a bottle. "They only had generic, but that should work, right?" Sure. Feel better." Juniper moved away with quick steps. "Don't follow me, don't follow me." His cowboy boots clomped after her, and she fought the urge to run through the aisles like a toddler breaking free from their parents. Of all the things I don't need right now. The checkout line was long, of course. She stopped, tempted to chuck her antacids into the wind and flee to her car. She hunched her shoulders. "I'm not 5. I'm a grown woman. I can deal with this." "Hey, Junie, can we talk outside?" Oh, his voice is so warm and friendly. Memories rushed through her mind. Long walks in the moonlight, driving in his truck with the music blasting, candlelit dinners. We never walked the paths I wanted to walk. We never listened to my music, and I never got to pick the restaurant. Something new flooded through her, and suddenly she felt as light and airy as that bubble the Good Witch arrived in on Wizard of Oz. "Sure, we can talk outside." She paid for her medicine and went outside to wait for him. Now that she was there, her palms began to sweat. She closed her eyes. "I know the truth. I always knew it." Nick came through the door and towards her with that purposeful stride he always used when he was sure of himself. She stuck out her chin and waited. He stopped and reached for her hand, but she kept her arms folded tightly. He let his hand drop. "Listen, Junie, the past few months have been miserable. My family gave me a hard time all through the holidays because you weren't with us. I've spent sleepless nights yelling at myself for how I've been." He stared into her eyes. "I'm lonely without you." She gave a short laugh. "Thanks, Nick. I must say, I appreciate you so much right now." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "It's always about you, isn't it?" She turned on her heel. "Every time, in every situation. Even now, you can't say you're sorry or even ask about my Christmas. It's all about how I made you feel. Well, guess what? I don't care how you feel anymore. I have my own life where I get to do what I like, and I wish you the very best, all by yourself." And with that, she flipped her hair and walked to her car. When she slammed the door and started the engine, her heart was beating faster than a hummingbird's. But it was more from excitement than anything else. Never in her life would she have thought she could say anything of the sort to Nick. She could hear Penny's words when she'd tell the story later. "You did good, Juniper. You did good." As she was about to pull out, a message blinked on her phone's screen. Aiden's cheerful "Merry Christmas," complete with tree and bell emojis. She stared at the screen. "Merry Christmas to you," she typed quickly before she lost her nerve. "Miss you. Hope to see you soon." When Juniper arrived at her apartment, no one was there. Penny must still be at her parents'. Her shoulders sagged. Why did I think it was so important to pick up that medicine? Penny probably grabbed an extra bottle from home. Juniper continually went out of her way to care for her roommate, even though Penny never asked her to, and was perfectly capable of taking care of things on her own. Probably because that's the role she'd taken with Colleen, even though she'd been the younger sister. Colleen's mind was always focused on her art. She'd continually forget to eat breakfast or misplace her keys. Maybe I do that with Penny because she's so prone to disasters. These thoughts brought up the horrible craft fair. Her gaze flicked to the beautiful purple pitcher which sat on the shelf of honor where it had been since the last time she'd unpacked it. Her dad's final words as she left from Christmas had been, "Juniper, don't stop with your art. I know you've had a discouraging time of it, and goodness knows your mother and I haven't helped, but there's beauty in your hands. Don't waste it." She took the vase down and ran her hand over the smooth surface. Placing it on the desk by her computer, she sat down and began to click the mouse. The key clicked in the lock, waking Juniper. She rolled over and sat up on the couch where she'd fallen asleep. "Hello," said Penny as she walked through the door. She placed an armload of bags on the table. "Look at that, you got my antacid. Thanks." "It was definitely a sacrifice," said Juniper. "Have I got a story for you?" "Beyond hanging out with your parents for 2 days?" said Penny. "Yep. It involves Nick." "Oh my gosh," Penny's eyes widened. "Don't tell me y'all are back together. I mean, whatever you think is best, but—" Juniper laughed. No, nothing like that. But thanks for spoiling my story." Penny exhaled. "Phew. Okay, I want to hear all about it, but I'd better get these leftovers into the fridge. You want anything before I put them away?" "Sure, I'm starving." Juniper staggered up from the couch. "I'll be right in there. Just want to check something on the computer." She went to the desktop and hit the enter key. It was silly to get her hopes up, but maybe she'd had at least a few views of the vase on the craft website page. An email notification popped up and she clicked over. As she read over the email, a warmth ran through her like she was stepping into a perfect bubble bath. Her fingers crept up to her mouth and she gave a squeal. "Penny! Penny, come look!" Penny rushed into the room, a spoon filled with mashed potatoes in her hand. "What is it?" she said with her mouth full. "My vase!" Juniper tried to steady her shaking voice. "My vase sold on that craft website you told me about, in 2 hours, for $400. "Wow!" Penny sat down on the back of the couch to study the screen. "Juniper, this is wonderful. It means you could sell more of your stuff online." She smacked her lightly on the shoulder. "Like I've been telling you for, what, at least a year?" Yeah. Juniper felt a sheepish grin spread over her face. "You were right." "I know I was right." Penny licked the last bit of potatoes from the spoon. "Maybe you'll listen to me about everything from now on. I will be the queen of your life." Juniper rolled her eyes. "Don't count on it." Her phone glowed with a text from Aiden. "When are you coming to Wimber? I have a present for you." "Maybe soon," she texted back. A smiley face emoji popped up. She stared at the notification on the computer screen, still scarcely able to believe it. "I guess I'd better get out my pottery stuff again." Chapter 8. Restored. Spring settled around Juniper, fresh and powdery as though newborn. She pulled the last plastic container out of the RAV4 and took a deep breath. Random wildflowers nodded at her from cracks in the pavement where they bravely endured. "Nothing like spring in Texas," said Penny. "Nope, the drive here was spectacular," said Juniper. They set up quickly. Juniper patted a honey pot as she placed it in the perfect spot. "Is that a new piece?" asked Penny. "I haven't seen you make one of those before." "One of my customers requested one, so I watched an online tutorial," said Juniper. "I've learned how to make lots of new stuff over the winter." Penny eyed the row of clay pieces. "You were good before, but these are amazing." "Thanks. I've had a lot of fun. I'm so glad I didn't quit." "Me too," Penny beamed. "Who else would be my art buddy?" "I'm just glad it's paying for itself so well," said Juniper. She'd sold dozens of pieces on the craft website, some higher and some lower priced, and now had a faithful group of watchers waiting for her to list new pieces. She'd even been able to cut back on hours at the pub. But she and Penny had decided there was nothing as fulfilling as watching people look through their wares and purchase them in person. So she'd gathered up her courage and agreed to start doing craft fairs again. Then there was Aiden. She hadn't seen him since the disastrous fall sale, but they had texted regularly since Christmas. Every time she thought of him, her heart fluttered. Will it be the same? What if he found someone else and he's just texting me to be nice? Despite these misgivings, her heart beat with hope, and she couldn't wait to see him again. The weather was perfect, and the breeze soft and unthreatening. Penny checked the legs of their canopy once more. "Looks good. And of course, at the slightest hint of gusts, we'll tear down and go home." "That's the plan," said Juniper. "I think the special wind shield tarps help put my mind at ease as well." "Good thing you're making the big bucks now." Penny laid out a row of business cards on the front table. "This new setup cost a fortune." "Worth every cent," said Juniper. She stepped back. The booth looked better than ever. In addition to her pottery, Penny had painted a brilliant trio of bluebonnets that she knew would sell quickly, along with several other gorgeous wildflower paintings and a pair of cottontail rabbits that looked like they'd jump down from the canvas at any moment. I suppose I'll go get coffee, Juniper said. Uh-huh, said Penny. We both know what, or should I say who, you're really looking for. She folded her arms. Get me some coffee, too, if you ever actually make it to the cafe. Sure. Juniper couldn't hold back her smile. She walked through the canopies, scanning beneath each one for Aiden's shaggy mane. His canopy wasn't set up in the usual place. She hadn't asked him if he would be there. It seemed too forward. A part of her wanted to surprise him. Maybe he decided to do a craft booth somewhere else today. A few bigger shows in the area did overlap with this one, but she and Penny always chose Wimber no matter what for sentimental reasons. Glumly, she plodded on to the coffee shop and purchased her coffee and scones. Throughout the day, she'd catch herself watching for him. Every time a tall man with longish brown hair went by the booth, she'd snap up to check and see who it was. The 5th time she did this, Penny sighed. Would you just text him already? You're driving me crazy. I don't want to seem desperate, said Juniper. Penny rolled her eyes. Girl, you are desperate. Sales were brisk. Juniper allowed the business to become a distraction. She made silly, random small talk with the various people who walked by. Miss Agatha came to the booth. Why, hello, darling. Good to see you two here again. Aiden told me what happened last time. I'm glad you got back on the horse, so to speak. Me too. Juniper tried to sound casual. Hey, do you know where he is today? Aiden? The elderly woman pursed her lips. I think he went to visit his grandmother. She had a hip replacement at a hospital in Austin yesterday. Oh. Disappointment stung the back of Juniper's throat. Why did I wait so long? After Miss Agatha left, Juniper stared at her phone. Text him, murmured Penny. Okay, said Juniper. She hastily typed, Miss Agatha told me about your grandmother. I hope she's doing better. She squeezed her eyes shut and hit send. The phone almost instantly glowed a response. You're in Wimber? Yes. We decided to do the craft fair after all. The next reply took a bit longer. I'll be back in 30 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Juniper read it to Penny and laughed. I don't know where he thinks I'd be going. We didn't set all this up just to leave 2 hours early. Penny shrugged. Well, with our recent track record. True. The next 30 minutes stretched on like days. Finally, Juniper saw Aiden's smiling face coming towards her in the crowd. His hair was longer now, pulled back into a ponytail. He carried a large rectangular package. Hey, he said as he reached the canopy. Hey, it's good to see you, she said, willing to keep herself from running into his arms. His gaze lingered over her eyes, her cheeks, and down to her lips. I missed you. Can we go talk somewhere for a moment? Juniper glanced at Penny. Penny threw up her hands. Of course, take your time. Aiden gestured with the crook of his elbow. Shall we? Sure, said Juniper. They strolled down the street through the crowd. People went by like living blurs. Juniper's stomach twitched inside of her, and she was beginning to regret the extra 2 cups of coffee she'd downed during the day like bar shots. Is your grandmother okay? She asked. Oh, yes. She's a tough old bird. She's already up and walking around. She ran a half marathon last year, so I think she'll be all right. Aiden led Juniper past the cafe to the antique store next door. He pushed a picket fence open that led to the back of the store. Are we okay to go back here? Asked Juniper. Of course. I know the owners, and they allow overflow from the coffee shop to come here. He pointed out several little garden tables set up on the back porch. Riots of wisteria climbed trellises throughout the yard, and honeysuckle perfumed the air. Aiden pulled out a chair. Shall we sit? Juniper settled into the metal-painted chair, running her finger along the wrought iron design. She tried not to stare at the paper-wrapped parcel as Aiden placed it on the table in front of her. Well, he said. Well? You can open your present. Oh, is this for me? Yep. His knee jiggled, and he scooted back his seat away from the table a few inches. She tore open the brown paper. Inside was a mosaic picture of an angel in white with a backdrop of purples, pinks, and blues. "It's our cloud angel from that night at the barbecue place," she breathed. "Oh, Aiden, it's beautiful." His smile covered his face. "Yeah, I'm glad you remembered." She touched the bumpy surface of the picture. "Wait a minute. I recognize these colors. Aiden, did you make this with my pottery?" "Yes." He took her hand. "Even though it was broken, it was too special to throw away. I had to do something about it." "You mean you didn't give up on it?" she murmured. "Right. It might have been through some rough times, but it was still beautiful." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her fingers. Then he rose and drew her up from her seat. Finally, he pulled her close. "Is this okay?" he murmured into her hair. "More than okay," she said, and tilted her head back for a kiss. This has been Love and Craft Fairs, Miss Main Street, Book 4. Written by Angela Castillo. Narrated by J. Grace Pennington. Copyright 2023 by Angela Castillo. Production copyright by Angela Castillo.